In today's video post, we will be discussing briefly the significance of the Puritans on the founding of America, both during the colonial and subsequently in the early Republican period of America's founding. Um, it's worth noting that the Puritans themselves certainly saw themselves as a political and social movement. They sought to kind of unify them in a new paradigm. They believed very strongly that the Anglican Church had not progressed far enough with respect to the Reformation of Catholic doctrine and practices, and they were seeking to further that Reformation both in England itself with Puritans like Oliver Cromwell, but also in the smaller group of Puritans that did end up settling in the New England colonies. Um, there are a couple of Puritan practices and ideas that were somewhat revolutionary at the time, both socially and religiously, because they could not separate the two, that have had a significant impact on American political thought and the founding specifically of America. The first was the congregationalist nature of the Puritan church in general. It tended to encourage a much higher level of participation than other groups did. It was a lot less elitist. They believed that the local congregation had a lot of input into the process, had some even oversight responsibilities as far as choosing elders and other things like that. This level of participation obviously would eventually spill over into an idea of at least religious equality among different people. They saw themselves as all being equal with one another in some regards. That's not to say that there weren't clear lines of delineation, because there were, but it was certainly a lot more equitable than a lot of other churches that still employed a very rigid hierarchy, like the Anglican Church. The other one is the emphasis that the Puritans put on literacy and education. Obviously, they saw this as being necessary to further one's own spiritual relationship with God, and literacy was a requirement for that in order for that process to take place. But they still encouraged that to a degree and to an extent that was previously pretty much unheard of, and integrated that into the laws of the Massachusetts colonies, and also in the public expenses in Harvard College, for example, but also primary schools and public schools. The Puritans invested a lot more in public education and common education than many other groups. They also tended to encourage women's participation, maybe spiritually on a higher level than they normally were accustomed to, which also gave them a higher level of participation in the civic realm. This isn't to say that they were egalitarian in that respect, or in many other respects as well, but they were more towards an egalitarian philosophy than had previously been experienced. All of these high participation in the institution, literacy and education, a sort of equality in certain terms, specifically in how people relate to the institution itself, are all foundational principles that have been incorporated and were incorporated in the Constitution of the United States of America in 1789. And to say that they were influenced by the Puritan thought is possibly an understatement, because they were very strongly influenced by the Puritan social norms, even though a lot of the founders themselves were not Puritans religiously.